Hi everyone, it's Stephen Handysides here and welcome to another podcast on how to deliver outstanding events that create engagement and memorable experience. Well, I have a very special guest on this podcast. It's Desiree Dolecki, and she is the Director of Conference and Events from Crystal Lake, Illinois, from the Associations of Manufacturing Excellence. Welcome to the show, Desiree.
Thanks for having me.
And tell us a little bit where Crystal Lake is, as I mentioned when we were talking before. Sounds a really awesome place to live.
Yeah, actually it is. It's very lovely. We're about 50 miles northwest of Chicago.
Okay, fantastic. And so just tell us a little bit about your background. It seems like you are doing quite a lot. When I looked at just in terms of the Association of Manufacturing Excellence, it seems like there's a lot of large events, smaller events. Why don't you just tell us a little bit about your background? Were you always in events, or were you in different parts like marketing, etc.?
Yeah, sure. So I've been an event professional for over 20 years. So I kind of fell into it, which I think most event planners do. I don't know anyone that says when I grow up, I want to be an event professional, but I did. So as soon as I started working on events, I was hooked. So that was it. So yes, my whole career has been in events. So I've done everything from, strategic and tactical event planning, trade show planning experience I've got for both corporate and associations. So the bulk of my career has been mostly in planning events in the healthcare sector. So I do have a lot of experience there, but, currently as in my role of director of conferences and events for AME, they are a nonprofit and not healthcare related, although we do support the healthcare sector. Our mission is to improve organization and personal performance for our members. So the bulk of what we do is events and putting on events, and with our mission of share, learn, and grow. So I design event environments, for the exchange of peer-to-peer knowledge. So it's a volunteer-led organization, and our volunteers are key for getting the content and curating the content and looking at industry experts to come to present on different topics. So where we kind of differentiate there is having the practitioner really leading that conversation versus like a consultant or, paying a speaker. Other than that, I'm a lifelong learner. So I've been doing a lot in this time during COVID to, make sure I'm up to date on the different industry trends and what's going on with virtual, especially. I rely a lot on industries, associations like Event Leadership Institute and MPI. So they've done a lot in my learning journey. During COVID, I was able to earn my CMP. So I can say after 20 years, I have that now. I have a real passion for events, and I can't imagine doing anything else. I really like being in this role. I feel that an event professional is the glue, right? The connector to everything that's happening within an event. So you've got your hands in a lot of different places, and it's really hard to let any group work in a silo, because you really help to bring it all together to execute the best event that you can.
Yeah, that's so true. I mean, with events, obviously you do need it's a specific personality, because there can be a lot of pressure in the events business. Having run numerous events myself, I think a lot of us do thrive on the pressure that we get around organizing events, especially, and again, I'm not too sure if you find it, but when you're running an event and you're relying on others to provide content, they always leave it to the last minute, or there's always problems, there's issues, and then you have to think on your feet. And I really love that part of it. How do you deal under pressure when it comes to these events? Or do your events just run really, really smoothly and everyone's really, really good and behaves? And
yeah, I don't know that you'll find any planner that would say that. There's always going to be some drama in there. I think early on in my career, I didn't have as much of that patience and, being able to manage the stress, because I guess I really didn't know until I was in it doing it, what to expect. So over my last 20 years, definitely flexibility is key. And I know I can't control everything, right? So I am ready. If something goes wrong, I am ready to figure out a solution for it on site right then and there. I let our volunteers know who are helping us put on our conference, don't wait till the end to debrief and tell me everything that went wrong. As soon as something is happening, let's deal with it, because we could most likely 99% of the time fix it and move on and have a successful event. So being agile is important, flexible, having a strong team around you, making sure they're in the know. My team makes fun of me. I always have one more thing that I want to tell them when they're trying to get off the phone with me. But it's important to be transparent and make sure that everyone knows what's happening so that they are self-sufficient, especially on site, to deal with some of the issues that are likely to come up. So then they don't always have to rely, on me, one person, running around crazy on site, which I do miss. I haven't been on site in 2 years. So I'm missing all my steps that we usually get in being on site.
Yeah, for sure. And, this month we're really focusing in on associations, and there's always this constant push towards more engagement. How can we give members lots of engagement? The statistics all show that members will leave, 50% of them will leave because they just don't feel like they're getting enough engagement. And then another percentage is they just don't feel like they're getting enough value for money. So we're constantly having to think, what can we do to add value to members' lives? So there's no point, obviously, just putting any content together. I suppose there's a lot of thinking that needs to be done around what content, whether that's webinars or events, that is going to wow our members. How is that in terms of your membership? What does a typical 12-month diary look like? You've got events, don't you? You've got larger ones. Do you run, webinars? Are there sort of workshops that are in person or hybrid?
Yeah, I don't know if we've got a standard now because a lot has changed, but we're definitely doing, when COVID hit, and like I said, most of our revenue coming from events, that was affected, the events, the revenue coming in because we weren't holding in-person events. So the pivot to virtual was necessary, right? So, but in terms of, let me get back to your question about engagement. So for us, when I look at the last 2 years, we've only done virtual. So we went from doing no virtual to all virtual. So there's a lot of learning that had to happen in between there. So, and the one thing I learned for sure is that virtual events are a lot of work. And it is a lot, especially that engagement piece, because if you don't have that right, you're going to lose people. So some of the data that I have, looking over the last couple of years of what we've done is that, first of all, for a lot of events we do, we're offering them for free to our members, right? So we want to keep the engagement there just within the community, keep conversations going, offering content. I mean, that's what we do. Again, share, learn, and grow. So we wanted to keep that going. And, it's tough to put that fair market value on what you're offering. You don't want to devalue it, but you don't want to and plus the market is so saturated with content. You have to look at what everyone else is doing and benchmark. So there's a lot of that going into play. But of the events that we've been holding, so we notice when we have a free event, however many people sign up, we're pretty consistent in that 50% will show up to the event. But the biggest thing for me is that 50% that's on in the beginning of the event, are they still on at the end? Because then I know that they are engaged. And most of the time, 99% of the time they are. So, so one of the things that we do, we make sure, instead of a webinar, actually, I like doing Zoom meetings like we are right now, because the camera's on, we encourage cameras on, everyone can see each other. We've done things where we've had a virtual MC. So for our larger event, we have an annual conference that we do every year. And this year we're in Dallas in October for the first time. It'll be hybrid, but first time that we'll have the in-person component since 2019. But the last 2 years that we've done it virtually, we've had this, I'll give him a plug. His name is John Colby. He was great, a great improv. And now we've got this kind of face to our, virtual conference, but he really brought everything together we had him engaging our audience with a kickoff event, which was super fun because, improv comedy, people who could think like that on their toes, I have a lot of respect for them, but he kept us engaged the whole time. Another thing that we've done is, having a room host or multiple hosts, people, you got me behind the scenes, always looking from a production standpoint, but some of our volunteers, either engaging with people in the chat or, making sure that the right people are in the room. Do we have things coming up next? Do we have the right people in line, anyone hanging out in the waiting room. So all the things that, that and the different tools that we use, kind of looking at that from a back end perspective as well. And then what I found to be very helpful for engagement is really prepping our speakers. So like I mentioned, a lot of our speakers are practitioners, so they're not professional speakers. So they're new to this too, right? Going from presenting in person to this virtual. So one of the first things I did was so much research and so much learning. Again, I spent so many hours a week on free webinars and anywhere I could find information on virtual, and taking it all in and I developed this virtual toolkit for presenters. So anytime I learned something new, or I had a tip on technology, or, any kind of tips I can have on their camera, their lighting, sound, even the format of their presentation, storytelling, interview style, even going back to like what we always tell our speakers, like, your PowerPoint shouldn't have your whole story on it, but be more visually appealing, right? So going back to some of that stuff, but having all those in there, and then even holding speaker briefings. So that way we get the speakers in a room and we start to talk about all these things. We recommend that they do a poll or ask a question to get the chat active every 5 to 8 minutes. So we know that definitely gets engagement going for sure. Yeah. Especially if you ask a question that's, very personal, not very personal, but something that's relevant to the audience, because they're likely to want to talk about themselves or what they've done, right? Mm-hmm. Versus anything else. So, and then two, even allowing time for networking, because obviously that is engaging, but you can't, network is different in the virtual world than it is in person. It happens organically. You put people in a room, they're going to chat, but you put them in a Zoom room and they're probably just going to sit and stare at each other, right? Because no one wants to be that first one to really talk and engage. So it definitely has to be facilitated. So again, here's where our volunteers come into play. I think music definitely adds to engagement, and we've been using music differently throughout our events, even if it's during a break, because, you're running to get your coffee or hit the, restroom, and then you hear the music stop. You're like, I got to get back to, the event's about to kick off again. So I would say those are probably the things that we're using the most in terms of getting people engaged and keeping that engagement going throughout the event.
There is some amazing, sound bites and advice that you've even given there for other events professionals. I think what you're doing is absolutely fantastic. But I do think you're right, and I think in particular when everyone got thrown into virtual quite early on, I think people just didn't really know what to expect. When we actually put on our own global virtual conference back in 2019, so it was before the pandemic, and we were trying to sell the concept of virtual because we wanted to give aesthetic doctors, the same access to the best speakers in the world, rather than having to travel to Paris or to Monaco, which was where the couple of the big conferences are. So it's not cheap. And virtual was a great way, I feel, in terms of educating, but bringing together amazing speakers that can often be very, very expensive, but it is slightly, they have been more cost effective, but it's probably changing now. Now that a lot more people are doing virtual, that the speakers are probably going to go, well, I need to charge you my same rate, but at least you don't have all the travel expenses and things like that. But no, I think the networking part is always been a bit of a challenge with regards to virtual. But I think it's just a different way of networking, I think, which you've outlined as well. I think, when you're talking about that assisted by having someone in there just to get things warmed up and going. I belong to a number of associations, and we get put into a room, and then someone's got to speak first and go, oh, hi, but my name's, it's like being back at school, right? Introducing yourself, where you're from and stuff. And it's a lot of fun once it gets going. And if you've got a good group that, and everyone's happy to share, and there's that transparency, it's fantastic. So with regards to your larger events, what sort of format do you use for that? Is it a whole series of webinars, Zooms, or is it you have more of a structure like a software that sort of helps you schedule all of those meetings out? Do you have, what do you do with the vendors and things like that?
Yeah, I would like to say that we have all this super cool technology behind us. We have that technology that we had before COVID, which we had to make do because we didn't have a budget to invest in anything. So of course, again, our volunteers they're always so helpful to get straight to the, how are we going to do this? So I had to back them up. There's so many platforms, and as you probably have seen too, so many different companies jumping on the bandwagon as soon as virtual was needed, right? So we decided, because we didn't have the budget to invest, that we were going to look at the tools that we had and we made them work. So it was actually probably even harder because, right, there was a lot of workarounds and a lot of more manual processes that we had to put into play to make it work. But the tools that we had did the job. And, I'm very, grateful for that. And actually, for our last two conferences that we had to pivot to virtual, we were able to offer on-demand content through our platform, which is something that we've never done before. So it was even a more of an added value to our participants to be able to access content on demand for 6 months versus in previous years when we had the in-person, because we do have a lot of content. There's so much to choose from. We might have, 6 to 9 concurrent sessions. So there's always something where someone, I'm going to miss this or that. And because none of it was being captured except for our keynote sessions. So, you think if we have 54 sessions, 9 keynotes, that's a lot of hours that you're missing out on being on site. So that's one of the things and a model that we're going to go forward with this year with our hybrid conference is to be able to offer the on-demand content again. So really adding more value to that conference registration.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. And so when it comes to, so you have, I suppose, have you done hybrid before? Because you've done in-person, virtual, and now you're going to go hybrid.
No,
so
and it's, we have not. So I'm a little nervous. So again, it's in October this year. And, so we've already been talking about hybrid for the last, year that we want to do it this way. So, I started my approach the same way I did with the virtual, like I'm going back to the beginning, like what are our goals and objectives, right? So, and it's not as simple as, I've done virtual and I've done in person. So now we're just going to marry it. So there's a lot going into it, a lot of new things I'm learning about it. A lot more, budget that we need to consider and budget considerations. And, we need to see, are we able to support that? The resources, it's like running 2 separate events. And we have a small home team. There's only 6 of us we've got 1 open position. So hopefully we have a 7th by the conference. So yeah, it's a little scary, but, if anything, these last couple of years have been probably the biggest challenge in my career since, 2001 when September 11th happened, right? And then that really changed the events world. This is something that's not going, I don't think we're ever going to be back to how we were before. I think that we're going to have to keep on being innovative and creative in how we look at our event design. And especially, if budgets are tight, like how do you keep moving forward and doing what we need to do if you don't have all the tools and resources that you need?
Yeah, no, that's absolutely true. Look, Desiree, I think honestly, this interview has been fantastic. You've given so much great information. Lastly, is there any sort of top tips or any bit of advice for all of our listeners that they should be thinking about if they are pivoting into hybrid? Or they haven't had a taste of virtual yet? Have you got sort of any sort of bits of advice for our listeners?
I do. I started thinking about what were the biggest challenges, right? Because it all seems so overwhelming when you think about, I'm going to take this our largest event that we do and turn it into virtual, because it's not just, right, you don't just flip a switch and it happens. You have to be very thoughtful about every step of the way. So if I had to boil it down, there was five challenges that I recognized, mostly after the fact, when I looked back at all my process and how I went through the transformation, right? And the first one is the transformation. So if you're going virtual, you need to realize, well, for us, and this was back when we were still deciding in 2020, because that was my most challenging event was, we've been planning this in person and we plan 18 months out. So we're well into, this in-person conference, and all of a sudden, I bring up COVID in February and everyone's like, I'm like, no, I think this is going to be a thing. Certainly it was. So, when to make the call, can you support it? Do you have the tools and resources, as I talked about? So, and again, going back to the basics. So if you are going to, start doing virtual, or you're transforming an event from in-person to virtual, or, hybrid or whatever, I think going back and asking about, asking what are your goals and objectives first before you confirm your execution or your strategy. Because again, there's so many tools and things out there that you don't want to pick how you're going to do it before you know what you really want to do and what matches, and pairs up with that.
Very good.
And the second challenge is the value, right? So another thing, just, we had our price point for in-person. Does that mean we charge the same thing for virtual? Well, no, right? Because there's not the food and beverage and all the other stuff and all the other things that you get on site, and some of the budget items that happen on site that don't happen virtually. So and you have to, what will the market bear in terms of pricing? What is our value proposition for content? Does it translate well to virtual format? Maybe there's some things that you need to change, so what design changes do you need to consider? So how are you going to deliver it, right? I would say do a lot of benchmarking. I mean, I've done so much benchmarking, and two, you don't want to undercut, right? You want to be fair and reasonable in your pricing for what you're offering. And for us, again, with that 6 months of on-demand content, it was an added bonus, but we didn't really add in terms of pricing with that. And, like I said, I mentioned we have if we do 54 sessions in person, I don't know that a virtual conference of 54 sessions would really hold engagement, for a couple of days. So we really pared it down to what someone would even want to sit through in a day, 2 days, 3 days, what have you. So the third challenge was in terms of the information. So when virtual was kind of the new normal 2 years ago, now it is the normal thing. I had to increase my virtual knowledge base, right? So again, countless hours of learning, webinars, certifications. I even became a COVID compliance officer. Anything that I saw that was related to events, how I can learn, be better. Again, I earned my, CMP. I had to be confident that I could pivot and that I could do a virtual event after never, managing one before. So I think that it was very helpful. And I really am grateful to the industry, partners, to the associations that provided a lot of the free content that helped me to increase my knowledge base to be able to put on the best event I could for our association. So the fourth challenge is expectations, right? Because you got a lot of people that you got to please. You got your stakeholders, speakers, staff, volunteers, vendor partners, exhibitors, sponsors, participants, our board, our CEO. So, it's a lot of people with a lot of ideas, and everyone, obviously came to help, but it's like, who do you listen to, or who has the best advice? So I actually put together a volunteer committee, and I was actually glad that I did that. So, I mean, like I said, we're volunteer led. So I wanted to make sure I had the right voices. Our conference chair is a volunteer role. So obviously that person had to say, our CEO. So and pulled together this committee. So we met regularly and we talked about all these things, how are we going to deliver this? We had to make the case for going virtual because it wasn't really, we were still on the fence, but we knew I was pushing to say that we needed to do something. We couldn't go 36 years of doing an annual conference and then just not do it. And then we would lose our connection with our community, right? Plus there was so many issues that were disrupting our industry, supply chain, workforce, operations. So the bulk of our members are from manufacturing, which I think I mentioned. So obviously they were looking to us for, hey, how do we go forward? What do we do? COVID has really affected us and what now? So it wasn't really a question of like, are we going to do something? It was more, the how and how are we going to get it done? So, so for me, the tip I would have in this area is, really developing your virtual strategy. So, which you don't know what it is until you start to ask the questions. So as I started to look at all the different elements that we offer in our conference, I had lots of questions and then tons of considerations. So as we started meeting and looking at different things and different ways to execute, I was able to answer all those questions. And that strategy document grew from, 2-page to 100 because it was so much information in there. And that really helped me. It was a framework, right, for moving forward and how we're going to execute this virtual. So the fifth challenge was the acceptance. So again, virtual is here to stay. I don't think we're ever going to escape it. Like I said, we're going hybrid this year. So we got the virtual element in there. I wasn't one of those people that was going to wait it out. After COVID, we'll be in person, it'll be fine. I was like, no, we need to change now. We need to pivot now. So we continue to move forward with virtual. It is an essential delivery method for our event strategy and will continue to be so. And I'm just, my last tip is to continue to learn and develop your skills, right? As a planner, as a virtual event producer, and really learning, because I don't think this is actually what I always tell my team is that we're never going to know everything. There's always learning to be done. I probably have managed hundreds of events over the 20 years of my career, and I always learn something new. So, I think it's important too, to go into that, like ready to learn, being agile, being flexible, and making sure that you are, staying on top of your game, especially in terms of the engagement, because I think that's the piece that's going to continue to change and develop. So, my piece of advice there is to every event that you do should be better than the next. And that is actually what, our association stands for, continuous improvement. So we always are trying to improve how we improve. So our next event should and will be better than the last one.
Very good. Oh God, that's such a great summary. Yeah, look, honestly, I think you'll be a huge success in this hybrid format. It sounds like you've got the procedures sorted for virtual. So it's just a coordination, isn't it? An organization. It is difficult with non-profit associations when resources are slim. So it's who's doing what, and it does require effort both sides when you're doing virtual and in person together. But it's exciting because I think it really does give people that option, that access to both, but in particular that access to on-demand content, which a lot of people, when they go to in person, they love the networking part, but they don't always get to see all of the speakers and listen to the content they want. And I think being able to go back in, where I see other associations do well is they'll actually run a virtual conference. So rather than just having content on demand, they might do, say, 30, 60 days later, they'll say, hey, we're going to run our virtual conference element. So it gives everyone a timed approach again. You can still have the content on demand afterwards, but it makes people feel like, oh, it's a bit of an event again, but it's virtual. And I've found that really, really good and fantastic for associations to be able to charge more to sponsors as well, because it's almost like they're getting two events for the not for the price of one, but you can generally add on about 22 to 30% if you're running it as a separate event rather than just having content on demand. So for anyone listening out there, we've done that with over 40 or 50 different associations the last 24 months, and it's been effective. So
yeah, that's an interesting strategy. Actually, we've done a couple, we call them watch parties. Yeah, we took some of the content from on demand, especially if it was getting low and people going in to access it. And we would have a separate event around that. And thankfully our keynotes, love them. They came to the watch party to answer any questions live. So it added another event, tag along, you're keeping that connection with your members, right? More sponsorship opportunities. So all around that is definitely a great strategy and a good idea for planners to use going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. Desiree, I'd just like to say thank you so much for that great content. The interview has been really great. Love to have you again. Love to hear how the hybrid approach goes, but no, really thank you for your time, and it was just invaluable to all of our listeners. So yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you.